There's one episode of Seinfeld where like George Costanza realizes that if I just say that one smart line, like in the party, and then leave the room, I'm gonna remember as that smart guy that always had the smart thing to say. So what he would do is that he would just say something clever, and then it's like, all right, I'm out, and then he would take off.
We need to basically shift our mindset from being tested to I'm here to connect. Because a lot of times we think that we're there for a test or they're always out to get us. I think we need to kind of shift that mindset and redefine that moment as, okay, you know what? I'm not being tested here. I'm here to connect. So we need to grow that mindset. Welcome back to Eminence Legacy, the show where we turn ideas into action and build better communication, leadership, and legacy, one episode at a time. Today, we're diving into the powerful insights from Matt Abraham's game-changing book, Think Faster, Talk Smarter. Whether you're at a job interview, called out in a meeting, or just trying to hold a convo at a networking event, this episode will help you communicate with more confidence, on the fly. Together, we will rise to our eminence.
How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Eminence Legacy Podcast. My name is Alfonso Cadena, and I'm joined here by my co-host,
Jose Luis Cadena, and thank you for joining us.
All right, Jose Luis. So today we're actually going to be talking about having conversations with people, whether it's in a spontaneous situation or whether you're meeting somebody for the first time or going to a job interview. There's so many places where we have to interact because that's how, basically every living creature has a way of communicating, right? So ours, it happens to be like a very sophisticated language in which some of it has to do with words that we actually say to the other person, and the other has to do with the mannerisms or the way we communicate with our nonverbal cues, right? So what's really important is trying to learn how to be comfortable around these situations, because the fact of the matter is that a lot of people are not comfortable with it. And it's happened to me too, where it's like, as I'm trying to apply these principles, I'm put in a position where I have to guide the other person within the conversation because they don't have practice with it as much, or they're not aware of it, right? So a lot of us have this idea that if we just continue, I guess it could go into two extremes, right? Because on the one hand, you can continue talking and think that you're a good conversationalist, which is not the way to go, because a lot of times what happens is that you end up losing the other person. Or the other thing that happens is that that you might be the type of person that doesn't put anything into the conversation.
One of the biggest things also is when they catch you off guard and they ask you for your opinion or your question. Like, let's say you're in a meeting and they ask you, so like, Jose Luis, what do you think about this? And they catch you off guard and there's like 5 people watching you. I mean, whether you're at a job interview or called out in a meeting or just trying to hold a conversation at a networking event or a party or a social gathering, it gets daunting. And this episode will help you communicate more with confidence and on the fly. Like what we're trying to be able to is to be able to engage as soon as we're engaged. And Mark Twain said something to the effect, learn to do this more spontaneously.
What's funny about when you bring up about being asked that like a question about your opinion? It's happened to me with in some conversations that I've had with the person that have a long-winded story to share, and then so they're like 6-8 minutes into the story that they're telling, and they'll ask you something. It's like, don't you agree?
Yeah.
Or they'll say something. It's like, you know what I'm talking about? Or has that happened to you? And then all of a sudden you're drawn back in. The best response I've come up with is just nod with an awkward yes. I try not to make it too obvious that I actually lost them a while back ago. One of the things that that I think that will come out of this also is having some self-awareness about that, right? So finding the information that you really need to communicate, because not everything that you have to say is relevant. You need to consider your audience of who's the one of who you're communicating with. What is it actually that you're trying to what to accomplish with that interaction.
Yeah, more than anything, learn how to read the room and also don't be so antsy to talk. Because sometimes we're trying to think of something to respond and we kind of lose a conversation. So hopefully we could give you some pointers on how to be able to be more spontaneous and answer on the fly.
So let's start from the very basic, right? So from what's going on inside the average person, there's a lingering anxiety of having to interact with new people. There's always that joke where they say, oh, I want to go out more, I want to do this, hang out more. And then when you finally get that invitation, you're looking forward to it, and then it's like 30 minutes before and you're dreading going and wondering is like, why did I even commit to this to begin with? One of the most fundamental basic things that you're feeling is that anxiety of having to meet new people. What exactly is the source of that anxiety? Really, what it is the anticipation of what you expect to come out of it. Like, meaning that you're not focusing on the present. You're not focusing on about having a good time or being right there at that moment,
At the
enjoying the
moment.
time. Instead, you're focusing on the future. It's like, man, what if I make an idiot of myself? Like, what if what if they don't like me? What if I never get invited to this again? What if I don't get the job? So you're already thinking about the outcome rather than being focused on that time and at the moment. And that's a big source of that anxiety.
Our own expectations of how we expect things to go, and then we feel that things are kind of being pressured or not moving in the right way. It gets us uncomfortable, and then we start with that little anxiety and that sort of feeling that you lose a calmness, and the calm goes to chaos. A lot of times, this is we need to learn a couple of strategies to be able to overcome this, because if we let the emotions overtake us, obviously we're going to be in a bad predicament.
There's always symptoms to this too. Some people might freeze at the moment, or your heart rate starts going higher, your hands start getting sweaty. There's going to be these symptoms where you know that. And so we need to get good at labeling what it is that we're feeling. At that moment, when you're having an interaction with someone, if you're feeling anxious, that's okay. And that's the very first step to to, to improving in our conversational skills, recognizing that it's okay to be anxious and that it's actually very common for. I know it's a very old joke, right? So it's where they say that the one thing people fear more than death is public speaking. So
That's true.
the joke is that most people would rather be would rather be in a casket than having to deliver a speech, right? A lot of people are driven by this anxiety, and one of the comforting things about that, once you come to the realization that that's what you're going through, is that you realize that other people have the same insecurities and they have the same anxieties and also worried about how that interaction is going to turn out. But when you're able to be aware of it and being able to take the lead and the initiative on this, it's a huge relief, because you'll have tools at your disposal, like you were saying. So there's definitely ways. It's not worrying about the future, it's about being in the present. One of the ones I personally like, something like walking around. You walk around the room, just try to, calm yourself down, whether it's before a speech or before an interview. Relax yourself and realize I'm here right now.
Some of the pointers that they give, because we're basing this off of a book that we read. It's called How to Think Faster and Talk Smarter. And one of the pointers that they give is, for example, one of the strategies would be breathe deep, exhale twice as long as you inhale. Reframe anxiety as excitement. The body reacts the same way to both. So tell yourself, I'm excited, instead of I'm nervous. A little bit of positive talk and like a pep talk to yourself, and always try to buy time. So, for example, like I'll give you a little application here. I'm in a meeting, right? And it's amongst several people, and they call on my name, Jose Luis. What's your stance on the youth program funding? And all of a sudden, I kind of freeze, and I take a breath and I reframe again and try to listen to the question again in my mind. So I could reply to something to the effect, great question. What we really need to think about is where the youth will be heading, if we don't invest in this today. And boom, you kind of change the conversation into leading them into an open question per se. And you're able to pivot the conversation and take a little bit away from the pressure that you're feeling. So you're buying yourself time, basically.
The breeding strategy is actually very practical because it's not visible, right? You can be pretty discreet about it and do it at the moment. And it's something that we have practiced doing, and especially like if you've been like in any form of in athletics or stuff like that, or you work out. your heart rate is going to goes up in those situations too, which is interesting because when you're having a social interaction or like something unexpected, like what you're describing, when you all of a sudden get called out, your heart rate is going to go up in the same way that it goes up when you're in a treadmill. And one of the ways that you can keep up with that, to get that back under control, is by controlling your breathing. Inhaling and then exhale twice as long. It's something that you could do in your spot, and it's going to bring down your heart rate back under control. And that adrenaline rush that's going to force, try to do, because one of the things that you have to understand too is that the moment that one of the reasons that your heart rate is going up to begin with is because of that fight or flight response. You're literally feeling that you're under threat, and at the moment is like you're trying to survive because you're worried about the outcome of the situation. You need to get yourself out of that mindset and relax yourself and realize, this really isn't a threat. I just need to focus in the moment. Definitely, like inhaling and exhaling is I mean, it's very easy to do. Bring down that heart rate and realize, you know what, I'm not any sort of danger. This is just a normal interaction. Let's just focus on the moment.
Another thing that he mentioned when you're public speaking or you're having to talk in front of a crowd, he mentions holding a cold water bottle in your hands so it could calm you. And that was pretty interesting because I do find that if you're talking in front of an audience, you usually do carry around a bottle of water. So I think that might be able to help.
Yeah, the water bottles are very accessible. That's definitely a good strategy too. Like I know he also mentions to listening to a song, which again, I mean, it's so accessible. I know, like in this case, it sounds like we're talking specifically about public speaking, but again, these are like whether you're heading to an event that's going to require you to socialize or you're heading towards an interview. These are things that like you could still work on before you engage on in that type of public event where it's going to require you to socialize. I know one of the ones that he mentioned that I've used myself is tongue twisters, because one of the things that people tend to forget is that your lips, your tongue, I mean, they need to be warmed up prior to like an engagement. I personally, I know he says it like in a way, as a way to calm yourself. I do it because I'll tell you why I do it. I'm bilingual, so I speak English and Spanish. I inherently hold insecurities because when you grow up with both languages, you're growing up, you're not good enough for um, monolingual English speakers, and you're not good enough to monolingual Spanish speakers. Because they're always finding some like, oh, you said this wrong, or that's not the way you pronounce that. So when I started getting involved more in like public events where I had to like do public speaking, I use a lot of tongue twisters because I would feel a lot more comfortable with my pronunciation. It's something I've gotten in the habit of doing to feel comfortable myself, not realizing that it was actually also a strategy to try to be able to focus on the moment, and just keep myself busy by doing something challenging that's going to require my attention.
One of the things that you mentioned is that I guess that you're worried that maybe you're way over your head on maybe speaking in front of a crowd or being part of a meeting. We have to embrace it and remember that if we've been invited, we're good enough to be there. We need not to aim for perfection. We need to aim for connection, not perfection. These spontaneous moments don't need to be flawless to be powerful. We just need to be able to deliver the message.
And one of the things too he was really good about explaining was this idea that we have the perfect scenario like planned out in our mind. That we want to be the smartest one in the room. We want to say that thing that's memorable. I catch myself watching the same shows like every like I'll finish the show, then I'll restart it. There's one episode of Seinfeld where like George Costanza realizes that if I just say that one smart line, like in the party, and then leave the room, I'm gonna remember it as that smart guy that
Yeah.
always had the smart thing to say. So what he would do is that he would just say something clever, and then it's like, all right, I'm out, and then he would take off, right? And it's funny, but it's and it seems absurd, but really, that's what we expect of ourselves, that we always want to say something clever. We always want to say something memorable or something that's going to reframe everybody's thinking. If you continue to operate in the same way that you're doing, you might hit that now and then, but you're setting yourself to a very high standard, which in reality what's going to end up more likely what's going to end up happening is that you're just going to freeze up and not say anything at all.
We have to remember that we have to be able to, like he talks about it, dare to be dull. Let go of trying to be clever and perfect. Let's just be compelling. The one of the stories that he highlighted, I don't know if you caught that one, is that Matt shares the story of how a student froze and they literally just asked him pick a wrong name, like choose a wrong name for yourself, and he wanted to pick the perfect wrong name for himself. So it took him long to actually choose that wrong name. He got stuck on trying to impress instead of trying to present. It was just a simple task. Okay, choose a wrong name for yourself, and they got stuck on that. So that's kind of funny because you think about it. I mean, they're literally telling you just pick a wrong name, and you still get hung up on the fact that we want to pick the right wrong name.
Yeah, yeah, and mind you, this is like when you say class, you're talking about a university setting. You're supposed to have the young and brightest, like when you're in your at the top of your wits. But even then, I mean, nobody's exempt from this stuff when you don't practice it. And that's the thing with this. Like, I mean, it's not something that you're going to be. You could go ahead and take down all these tips, but the only way you're really going to get good at it is if you go out there and practice. One of the things that has actually forced me to get better at the small talk is actually in our church. We have like our Sunday school in the morning, and then in the middle there's like a 30-minute break where there's always like good Southern Baptist, there's always like breakfast and sweet bread and coffee, you know, and there's these tables set up where you're forced to sit with people, you know, and it's a good sized congregation where you're always sitting with a new family or somebody you hadn't really interacted even though you've seen them around before. It's been the perfect practice on a weekly basis to being able to develop these skills. When we put ourselves in situations where we can improve on it, it's when we're actually going to see the biggest growth. And we're always going to be the harshest judges on ourselves, which is going to prevent us, you know, from practicing to begin with, because we're going to be telling ourselves, well, I'm just not a good talker, or I'm just not that interesting, or I just don't have that many funny stories. And I've met some people that they're just such good storytellers, and then like they'll be telling you their most mundane experience, and you're into it. And since I'm like a very analytical person, I'm like, was that really just a story about how he fixed his door? You know, like because I was into it this whole time, thinking that there was more to it, but really, there was just a really engaging story, and the way
Yeah.
it was presented and everything. Give yourself permission to talk or to say something, or write yourself. You know, you don't have to be waiting for the perfect line or for the perfect moment. I mean, it's okay to be mediocre. Not everything you have to say has to be clever.
We need to basically shift our mindset from being tested to I'm here to connect. Because a lot of times we think that we're there for a test or they're always out to get us. I think we need to kind of shift that mindset and redefine that moment as okay, you know what? I'm not being tested here. I'm here to connect. So we need to grow that mindset and learning, to be able to improve in those areas.
I really like a strategy. There's just general rules and principles that you could always carry with you. It's and right, so you don't have to cut people off. Like I met those people as like, you know, they always have to be right, and you'll share with them something, and then they'll say actually or no because you know they'll just cut off the line when you can just be a lot more proactive. And I know you mentioned that you brought this from the improv world where there's never such thing as no. You say yes, and light roast coffee is actually the one with the highest caffeine. It's like yes, and did you also know that it tastes really good with such pastry? You know, you don't have to respond to that with like a no or a actually. You know, it's like I mean, just add on to whatever it is that they're saying rather than cutting them off.
Yeah, most definitely play along with it.
It's also one of the things too that he like again when you're talking about mediocrity is the not yet mindset. You know that so we started off with this conversation by saying is that you probably have a goal with the interaction, whether it's to be keep somebody entertained or to meet somebody new, or maybe you're trying to, or maybe it's higher stakes, like you're trying to get a job or you're trying to get a promotion. Like when with the not yet mindset, you know, like particularly in those situations where you have a goal that you're trying to get something like a job, maybe it didn't work out this time, but there's always a next time. And that situation where maybe your interaction didn't go the way you expected it to, it's a learning experience. But just keep in mind the reflection comes later. It doesn't come at the moment. When you're having that interaction, you need to focus on that at that moment in time.
That's a big one that we need to listening isn't waiting to talk. It's more of looking for cues to connect and with clarity. We're looking for those moments that we're able to connect.
And definitely at the moment, what you want to focus on is the listening aspect of it. That's one of the things that I know we've talked about this before, like in other conversations, you know, but we're always so vested in what it is that we're going to respond. Once again, thinking about like wanting to be clever, wanting to sound like the one with all the answers. Just focus on being there and listening. Feel free to to slow the conversation down and stop and to ask for and repeat to them what they said, you know, like in a paraphrasing way, or to ask, or to ask questions that that could give you clarity to what it is that they're trying to say. Both are really good tools that can be used to slow the conversation down and make sure that you're really understanding what they're saying. And also paying attention to the environment. Like if it's too cluttered of a room, invite the person to, somewhere where you can pay more attention to their mannerisms, to what it is that they're telling you, to the context around it. Because again, that language is not limited to just the words that are spoken.
Another insight that I learned is the using the framework of what, so what, now what. So if you're trying to pick up on something or trying to, let's say they put you on the spot to give a presentation of your colleague that didn't show up, those are the basic questions that you need to ask. The what, so what, now what. Like in a real life story scenario, the way we would put this is like, let's say one of my clients used what, so what, not what. To answer the question in a job interview is what? I've worked in logistics for 6 years. So what? I've learned how to streamline operations. Now what? I'm ready to help your company grow efficiently. So with this simple setup, you set yourself up to be able to respond to questions a lot easier.
That's really good. Those are like overall structures that you could already carry on. I mean, most stories and conversations are already going to have like a built-in structure that you can find. They're generic frameworks that you could just apply to different situations, so you can know which one to pull out into a box depending on the situation. And it goes back to the other strategies they were saying is that the next play, right? So like, I mean, all right, fine. You said something that was, maybe like, I mean, wasn't your most the cleverest thing. Maybe you sounded kind of dumb or goofy saying it. That's fine. I mean, just move on to the next one, right? Just borrow from like from basketball, right? You missed the shot, just go ahead and take the next one. It's no big deal. I mean, it's not over yet. Miss, MISSED, is that's the part where you actually reflect on it. Now, this is the reflection on that interaction doesn't happen until after the event. Once everything's all over and you're no longer in the room, you no longer have the anxiety. You're in the restful spot of your home. You're not having to worry about the interactions, but you could go back and reflect on it. And the next time, you can just build on what you learned that from that previous interaction. But yeah, it's a work in progress, but the payoff is huge.
Most definitely. We just need to put it to practice. And there's so much stuff we could continue to review, but honestly, this is work in practice. Us ourselves are working on this because every time that we have to speak, like in public, and I know you yourself go through this, we kind of use those filler words, and sometimes when they put you on the spot you pause for a long time, and we try to kind of like you said, nod the head and say yes when we don't even know what we said yes to. So we need to try to focus more on what we're listening to, focus on your message so it's clear, concise, and compelling. When they're talking to you, just stay active listening and listen to the cue words to see where you're going to connect and be able to respond accordingly.
Definitely. That concludes this week's episode. Make sure you visit eminencelegacylive.com if you want to learn more about us. You could go ahead and schedule some coaching sessions. There's also a blog that you can follow through on there. And if you like this content, make sure you visit our Patreon so you can help us out with a donation of any amount. And have a great week, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. So whether you're on the mic, in a meeting, or standing in lunch, just remember you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be able to present. And remember that we rise to our eminence. Thank you and have a great week.